The Elite Combat Challenge was a prestigious event known across the galaxy as a brutal, unforgiving test of strength, skill, and resilience. Only the most fearsome warriors from each race dared to compete. The venue for this year's event was a sprawling, arena-like structure carved into the rocky surface of a remote planet, Zernax. Its red skies and jagged cliffs were as harsh and unforgiving as the contest itself. The spectators, a mix of diplomats, soldiers, and curious citizens from different species, filled the towering seats that circled the arena. Above them, hovering ships projected holographic feeds of the event to galaxies far away, where entire planets watched with anticipation. Among the spectators were the most esteemed leaders of several planets, eager to see which warrior would claim the title of the galaxy's strongest. At the center of this arena, warriors from all corners of the galaxy prepared for battle. Each of them represented a different species, and each had its own unique method of combat. Some were hulking, monstrous beings with scales thicker than steel and fists that could crush rock. Others, more lithe and agile, relied on their speed and precision. Telekinetic beings who could manipulate energy fields stood beside massive, armored creatures with bladed appendages. This was a contest for the strongest, and only the strongest survived. However, among the fearsome combatants, one figure stood out like a sore thumb. His name was Alex, a human from Earth. When his name was called for the Elite Combat Challenge, the assembled warriors and spectators had burst into laughter. A human had never competed in such an event, and the idea of one surviving even the first round was absurd to them. Humans, in the grand scheme of the galactic order, were considered physically weak compared to many alien species. Their technology, while advanced, was far behind that of some of the races competing in the challenge. To most aliens, humans were fragile creatures, barely worthy of being called warriors. But Alex, oblivious to the mockery, stood tall. His face, hardened by years of experience, revealed no sign of hesitation. Alex wasn't a typical Earthling. He had spent years training in martial arts, and as part of a special forces unit, he had traveled across Earth's most hostile environments, battling against both humans and machines in some of the most dangerous situations. But none of this had prepared him for what he was about to face in the Elite Combat Challenge. The event began with a booming voice from above, announcing the first round of combat. The arena was transformed, with sections of the ground rising and falling to create an ever-shifting battlefield. Sharp, jagged rocks shot up from the earth, creating natural barriers and hazards. Above, drones hovered, ready to eliminate any combatant who broke the strict rules of the challenge. Alex was paired with 3 opponents in the first round, each more menacing than the last. His first opponent was Goro, a massive creature from the planet Truxia. Goro stood nearly 8 feet tall, his body covered in thick, bony plates that acted as natural armor. His arms, each as thick as a human's torso, ended in spiked fists capable of crushing boulders. The crowd cheered as Goro approached Alex, confident that the human's death would be swift and brutal. But Alex was not intimidated. As Goro charged toward him, Alex's instincts took over. Years of training had taught him that brute force could always be outsmarted. Instead of meeting Goro head-on, Alex dodged to the side at the last possible moment, using the uneven terrain to his advantage. Goro, unable to stop his momentum, crashed into one of the jagged rock formations, leaving a deep crack in the stone. The audience gasped. They hadn't expected the human to survive even the first strike, let alone dodge it with such agility. Goro, enraged by his failure, turned back to Alex and swung his spiked fist again. This time, Alex ducked low, rolling under Goro's attack and coming up behind him. He delivered a swift, calculated kick to the back of Goro's knee, causing the giant to stumble forward. But Goro wasn't done. He swung his arm wildly, catching Alex off guard. The blow sent Alex sprawling across the battlefield, blood trickling from his mouth. The crowd roared with approval, certain that this would be the end for the human. Alex, however, wasn't finished. He slowly got to his feet, wiping the blood from his mouth and eyeing Goro with determination. This wasn't the first time Alex had been knocked down, and it certainly wouldn't be the last. He could feel the weight of the arena's eyes on him, but he wasn't fighting for them. He was fighting for survival, and he knew that in order to win, he needed to use every ounce of his training. As Goro charged again, Alex waited, his muscles tensing in anticipation. This time, instead of dodging, he met Goro head-on, using the giant's momentum against him. Alex grabbed hold of Goro's arm and twisted it in a direction it wasn't meant to go. With a sickening crack, Goro's arm broke at the elbow, and the giant let out a deafening roar of pain. Seizing the moment, Alex delivered a powerful elbow strike to Goro's exposed throat, causing the massive creature to collapse to the ground, gasping for breath. The arena fell silent. Goro, the invincible warrior from Truxia, had been defeated by a human. Alex stood over his opponent, his chest heaving from exertion, but his face was calm. He had won the first round, but he knew the challenge was far from over. The second opponent, Krell, was a creature of pure energy from the planet Voltex. Krell had no physical form, but instead existed as a swirling mass of electric currents and plasma. Krell's method of combat was unique, as he could shift his form to avoid physical attacks and deliver devastating energy blasts that could incinerate most life forms. As Krell approached, Alex knew that his usual tactics wouldn't work. He couldn't rely on brute force or even agility to defeat this opponent. Instead, he would have to think on his feet and find a way to outmaneuver Krell's energy attacks. The battle began with Krell launching a barrage of electrical blasts at Alex. The ground sizzled and sparked as each blast hit, but Alex managed to dodge most of them, using the terrain to shield himself from the deadly energy. However, he knew he couldn't keep dodging forever. He needed a plan. As Krell continued to fire his energy blasts, Alex noticed something. Each time Krell attacked, there was a brief moment where his energy form became more solid, just for a split second. It was barely noticeable, but Alex had trained himself to spot weaknesses, no matter how small. Using this knowledge, Alex began to bait Krell, dodging and weaving around the battlefield, making himself a difficult target. Each time Krell fired, Alex moved closer, until he was within striking distance. When the moment came and Krell's form solidified for just a fraction of a second, Alex struck. He grabbed a piece of broken rock and threw it with all his might at Krell's solidified core. The rock hit its mark, and Krell let out a screech as his energy form flickered and destabilized. In that moment of weakness, Alex lunged forward, using his knowledge of physics to disrupt Krell's energy field. With a precise strike, Alex caused Krell's energy form to collapse, leaving nothing but a faint crackle in the air. The crowd was stunned. Alex had defeated two of the galaxy's most feared warriors, and he hadn't even broken a sweat. But the challenge was far from over. As Alex prepared for the third opponent, he couldn't shake the feeling that the hardest part was yet to come. The spectators, once mocking, were now watching him with a mix of awe and disbelief. Could a human really survive the Elite Combat Challenge? As the announcer's voice boomed across the arena, declaring the final round of the first stage, Alex steeled himself for whatever came next. He had already defied the odds, but the real test of his strength and will was only just beginning. The arena hummed with tension as the crowd recovered from the shock of watching a human dispatch two of the galaxy's most formidable warriors. No one had anticipated that Alex, a mere human, would survive the first round of the Elite Combat Challenge, let alone win it. But here he stood, his body bruised but his resolve unbroken. The murmurs of disbelief from the audience turned into whispers of curiosity. How could a species regarded as physically inferior compete with the galaxy's most fearsome fighters? As the final round of the first stage loomed, the anticipation grew unbearable. The crowd leaned forward in their seats, eager to see if Alex could continue his improbable streak. But the true test was about to begin. The next and final opponent was unlike anything Alex had ever faced, a champion whose name was feared across galaxies, Tharok, the Undefeated. Tharok was a living legend, a hulking beast from the planet Gorlin. He stood over 10 feet tall, his body a mass of rippling muscle covered in metallic scales that gleamed like molten steel under the arena lights. His eyes glowed a fierce red, and his breath came out in low, guttural growls that sent shivers through even the bravest of warriors. Tharok was a titan, feared not just for his physical strength but for his brutal, relentless fighting style. His previous opponents had never stood a chance. Most had been obliterated within minutes of facing him. For a brief moment, as Tharok lumbered into the arena, Alex felt a pang of doubt. The size difference between them was staggering. Tharok towered over him, and each of his steps caused the ground to tremble. The arena, though vast, seemed to shrink in the presence of such an overwhelming force. Alex clenched his fists, reminding himself that this was just another challenge. He had faced impossible odds before and emerged victorious, but never against an opponent like this. The arena grew silent as the announcer's voice echoed through the air, introducing the final match of the first stage. The terms were simple: one-on-one combat until one fighter was incapacitated. There would be no time limit, no restrictions, only the will to survive. Tharok's eyes narrowed as he locked onto Alex, his lips curling into a menacing grin. To him, Alex was nothing more than an insect to be crushed. The crowd's excitement reached a fever pitch as Tharok charged forward without warning, his enormous fist crashing into the ground where Alex had been standing moments before. Dust and debris exploded into the air, temporarily obscuring the view. Alex had barely dodged the first attack, his heart racing. He had expected Tharok to be fast, but not this fast. The champion's massive size belied his speed and agility, making him a far more dangerous opponent than anyone Alex had faced before. Each step Tharok took reverberated through the arena, and every strike he unleashed left craters in the ground. Alex knew he couldn't rely on brute strength in this fight. The rock was far too powerful for a head-on confrontation, so Alex needed to think strategically. He moved quickly, darting behind the jagged rock formations that had risen from the arena floor, using them for cover as he tried to assess Theric's patterns. But Theric was relentless. With a snarl, he grabbed one of the massive rocks and hurled it at Alex with terrifying force. Alex barely managed to dive out of the way, the boulder smashing into the ground behind him with a thunderous crash. Dust and debris filled the air, and Alex coughed as he scrambled to his feet. His mind raced. He needed to find a way to use Theric's strength against him. The rock's next attack came even faster. He leaped across the battlefield with surprising agility, closing the distance between them in an instant. Alex narrowly avoided being crushed under Theric's immense weight, rolling to the side just in time. The rock's fist crashed into the ground again, sending shockwaves through the arena. The sheer force of the blows rattled Alex's bones, and he knew he couldn't keep dodging forever. But as the fight wore on, Alex began to notice something. Theric's attacks, while powerful, were predictable. His brute force was his greatest asset, but it also made him overconfident. The rock relied on overwhelming his opponents quickly, using his strength to crush them before they had a chance to fight back. But Alex wasn't just relying on his speed, he was analyzing every move, every subtle shift in Theric's stance. With each attack, Alex saw opening small gaps in Theric's defense that only someone with his level of training could exploit. Alex began to formulate a plan. He would have to be patient, wait for the perfect moment to strike, and take advantage of Theric's overconfidence. Theric, growing frustrated with Alex's evasiveness, roared in anger. He charged again, this time more recklessly, determined to end the fight with a single blow. But that was exactly what Alex had been waiting for. As Theric lunged forward, Alex sidestepped, positioning himself near one of the larger rock formations. Theric's momentum carried him forward, and as he crashed into the rock, Alex leaped onto the giant's back. With lightning speed, he delivered a precise series of blows to Theric's neck, targeting the weak spots in his thick armor like scales. The rock howled in pain, thrashing wildly as he tried to shake Alex off, but Alex held on, using Theric's own movements to keep himself balanced. He knew he couldn't overpower Theric directly, but he could use the giant's strength against him. With a final, well-aimed strike, Alex drove his elbow into the base of Theric's skull, a spot where the armor was thinnest. Theric's body seized up, his eyes wide with shock. For the first time in his career as a champion, he had been outmaneuvered. His massive form swayed for a moment, and then, with a deafening crash, Theric fell to the ground. The arena went deathly silent. No one moved. No one spoke. The sight of the undefeated Theric lying motionless on the ground was too much for the crowd to comprehend. For what seemed like an eternity, time stood still. Then slowly the realization began to sink in Alex. The human had won. As Alex stood over Theric's fallen body, his chest heaving from the exertion, he felt a mix of disbelief and triumph. He had done it. Against all odds, he had defeated the galaxy's greatest warrior. The crowd, once jeering and mocking, now erupted in applause and cheers. The sound echoed through the arena, a thunderous roar of approval and respect. But Alex didn't bask in the glory. He knew that this victory, while significant, was just one battle in a much larger war. The Elite Combat Challenge had only just begun, and there were still many more rounds to come. He would face even greater challenges in the future, but for now, he allowed himself a brief moment of satisfaction. As the announcer's voice boomed across the arena, declaring Alex the victor of the first stage, the other combatants looked on with a mix of awe and fear. They had all seen what had just happened, how a human, a species they had long considered weak, had defeated the most powerful warrior in the galaxy. Theric, slowly regaining consciousness, struggled to his feet. His face was a mask of rage, but there was also something else in his eyes, something Alex hadn't expected: respect. Theric approached Alex, his towering form casting a long shadow over the human. For a moment, Alex tensed, unsure of what would happen next. But instead of attacking, Theric extended his massive hand. "You fought well," human Theric rumbled, his voice low and gravelly. "I underestimated you. We all did." Alex hesitated for a moment, then took Theric's hand. The crowd erupted into cheers once again, the sound deafening. It was a gesture of respect, one that signified that Alex had earned his place among the galaxy's greatest warriors. As the cheers of the crowd filled the arena, Alex couldn't help but smile. He had come to the Elite Combat Challenge as an underdog, but now he stood as a champion. And though the path ahead would be difficult, he knew that he had what it took to survive. With the first stage of the challenge complete, Alex walked off the battlefield, his body aching but his spirit unbroken. The galaxy had taken notice of him, And from this day forward, humans would no longer be seen as weaklings. They would be feared, respected, and remembered. But as Alex left the arena, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. There were many more battles to come, and the true test of his strength was still waiting on the horizon.